at least 82 billion US dollars can be unlocked if Africa taps the untapped opportunities around the economic force of Africa's displaced communities. With conflict still prone in some of the economies, figures estimate that the continent can venture into the next frontier by unleashing the spending power of the 22 million plus workforce. CNBC Africa is now joined live by Emmanuel Mugabo, Managing Director for Inkomoko Rwanda. Thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you, Aby.
Quite a bold move in terms of supporting displaced persons in Africa. And looking at the potential this has, I'd like to know just the Inkomoko story in terms of how have you been able to transform these communities into meaningful economic force for the continent?
Right, so we started operations, at Inkomoko started operations in Rwanda 12 years ago, and we were working with micro and small businesses, basically doing direct investments into these businesses, providing them with trainings and mentorship. In that process, we identified an opportunity when it came to forcibly displaced people or entrepreneurs, and we went into those communities. Over the years, because of this, we've been able to expand to other countries, operating in Kenya, in Ethiopia, in South Sudan, and most recently in Chad. During this period, we've been able to support over 100,000 entrepreneurs. We've invested over 30 million US dollars in these communities, and indeed, these communities are viable markets. We've seen 97% plus repayment rates on debt financing that we've provided in these communities. Just last week, the Financial Times identified Inkomoko as the 8th fastest growing company in Africa, the only one in Rwanda, and that is directly linked to these entrepreneurs because of the work that we've been doing. And it's also notable to know that Inkomoko is the largest lender to these displaced communities, entrepreneurs in these communities at the moment.
Quite an interesting story there. And looking at the opportunities for private sector investments in terms of tapping more capital, I'd like to know what are some of the issues that you are doing towards breaking the traditional finance cycle?
Right, thanks for that. One thing I can say is that when you think about investment, there's the aspect of return and risk, but having worked in these communities, I think perceived risk is really much higher than the actual risk in these communities. I've talked about the repayment rates, for instance. You just mentioned the 82 billion purchasing power that is in these communities, the 22 million workforce, all this, and also looking at, giving you like maybe one example among many is an entrepreneur by the name of Anira in the eastern part of the country in Mahama camp. A lady who started trying to make soap using buckets and things like that. Having approached Inkomoko, we worked with her to put in place the systems that allowed her to have like a production process, purchase equipment, and her ambition is really to supply liquid soap detergents across the country. So that's just an example of the 100,000 plus, and we've seen that it's a viable market.
Interesting. And looking at these developments, I'm just keen to know, one of the biggest challenges is, one point you've captured that you have disbursed close to 30 million US dollars, but the bigger conversation is how do you scale this? Are there models you're looking at in terms of helping to reach more countries, especially in this era where we're seeing inflation is quite a big issue and access to capital remains a huge challenge for many entrepreneurs in Africa?
Right, I think the model that we've adopted, and we've seen that this works, is the combination of equipping them with the skills to run and scale their business ventures, investing capital into these businesses, but also most recently, we've also gone into the aspect of access to markets, because most of these communities, you find they're communities that are a bit away from this, like the capital cities and all that. So that creating that market, those market linkages also accelerates the development. So, and what I could say is, whatever models of financing that are existent, I think the first step is not to change the models, is really to step into these communities. I think that's the most important thing. All right. And then based on that, adaptation can happen.
Are you foreseeing a time and space where we'll be having all in?
All in. Thanks for bringing that up. Most recently, end April, we had Africa Forum on Displacement that happened in Nairobi. It happens every 2 years, and this was really a call to collective commitment to being able to have all players into those markets. And I believe that it will happen. I believe at some point it will happen.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Emmanuel Mugabo, MD Inkomoko Rwanda.
Thank you, Aby. Thanks for inviting me.